Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the finale of Ahsoka. This is the Star Wars series on Disney Plus that I have been absolutely loving. I know it's been divisive among some people, and yes, I do think there are some points in the show that's been a little bit bumpy here or there, especially when it comes to some of the characterizations. But now that we have the full picture, we can go ahead and discuss the season as a whole, the arcs as a whole, and especially the details that happen in this finale, because it is an insane episode of TV that I absolutely loved. I honestly think it might be my favorite episode of the series, and it's been a series of like a bunch of episodes that I've been saying was my favorite of the show so far, but genuinely I think this show ended in a great way that I cannot wait to talk about. And this will of course be a spoiler review, so if you've not seen the finale of Ahsoka on Disney Plus, definitely go check that out and then come back here and let's just discuss all the details that is in this episode. So the last episode ended off with Ahsoka finally reuniting with Ezra after all these years, along with, Sabine reuniting with him in the episode previous, but their whole plan and their whole mission was to stop Thrawn from escaping this galaxy, and Thrawn is still very much trying to escape this galaxy. He's throwing all his resources possible to try to stop these rebels from stopping him once again, because he's been burned by a small group of rebels. He has always dedicated a lot of his resources to it, but he is still always sort of underestimated their abilities in the past, and he is not underestimating them whatsoever. He's like, yes, there's 3 of them, yes, we've slowed them down significantly, but we're going to throw all these resources, we're going to throw ground troops at them, we're going to throw TIE fighters, we're going to shoot hellfire down on them as they try to make it to this tower. And he is so calculated, and he's so determined to get out of this galaxy that he's not gonna chance anything at all. He's not gonna let anything go to chance. He's gonna throw everything he has at this group, which makes this episode very intense. I think the only thing that could have raised the intensity in this episode was if our main characters felt a little bit more desperate to try to stop Thrawn from escaping. Ahsoka always has this sense of confidence that she's gained ever since the whole episode with her and Anakin in the world between worlds, which has been great for her character. I think she has a lot of trust in the Force, a lot of trust in her apprentice, even if she makes these difficult decisions. But honestly, besides that one little complaint with the stakes feeling a little bit lower because our main characters are still kind of joking around a little bit during this episode at times and having a lighthearted nature, I loved everything else in this episode. I mean, the episode starts off with the Night Sisters giving Morgan Elsbeth this blade of Talzin, which of course Mother Talzin was a character in Clone Wars. She was the introduction of the Night Sisters into Star Wars, which I absolutely love how creepy and weird these characters are, and to see the magic fully formed in this series was so great to see. And I've said it in previous videos on the channel where the fantastical elements of the Star Wars fantasy that this show in particular has been portraying on screen, I have loved every second of that. And as soon as she got that sword, you're like, you just know there's going to be an epic boss battle with Ahsoka and Elsbeth by the end of this episode, and I'll get into that fight in a second here. But just that setup and that stakes of this character getting this blade, it was so cool. And you also get to see Ezra building a lightsaber at the beginning of this episode, so you know that Ezra is going to have his own lightsaber. He's going to fight through this entire thing to begin with. And I think anybody complaining about Ezra not taking the lightsaber in that previous episode, I mean, I guess I sort of get the complaints, but he survived on this, planet for so long without his lightsaber. He has kind of trusted in the Force a little bit more. He's more in tune with, using the Force outside of just his lightsaber, and he's capable in just that, which I thought was a cool showcase of how he's grown as a character, which I don't think a lot of people really caught in, to that idea when they were doing that scene in the last episode. But all that's pushed aside, he built his own lightsaber, and you get a callback to Kanan with, of course, HUYANG saying that he was the one who trained, Kanan along with all the other Jedi in the temple to build their first lightsabers. And it was such a great moment to also showcase how a master and his ideas and how the training kind of flows through all the way down to apprentice. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that this is the first time that a lightsaber has been built on screen in a live-action Star Wars series or movie. Yes, I know that Return of the Jedi has that deleted scene with Luke building his lightsaber, which was unfortunately cut from that movie for pacing, sort of things, but there's no version of Return of the Jedi, extended cut or special edition with that scene included in the film, and so I'm pretty sure that this technically counts as the first time in live-action that we've seen a lightsaber be built, which is pretty cool. I just love the idea of seeing that on screen. But now we are all set up. We have Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra going off to fight Thrawn to try to stop him from escaping. We have Elsbeth have this blade of Talzin that she's going to use to try to stop this, and you have Thrawn, putting together all his resources to desperately stop them from getting up to the top of that tower and from getting aboard his ship to escape to the other galaxy. And we have our finale all set up here, and it's just pretty much all action from here on out. And again, Thrawn's plan is very much to slow these characters down at all costs. He sends 2 TIE fighters at first to, down their ship, which he succeeds in that. He downs the ship, and so they have to go on their little wolf creatures to the base of the tower. And once they get to the base of the tower, they're raining hellfire down on these characters in a very tense sequence where they're desperately trying to ride in to the door, and they're all using the force to open it and hold it open for just long enough for them to squeeze through. And of course, once they get inside, an armada of stormtroopers, the ground troops, show up to try to fight all our characters. And there was a great moment in this sequence where Sabine, is deflecting some of the laser blasts from these stormtroopers along with Ahsoka and Ezra, but she's not as, in tune with the force as they are, so she struggles a little bit. And Ahsoka, being a great master and kind of knowing how to utilize her apprentice in a very strong way, says, okay, back up, now use your blasters, we'll cover you. And it's just a great way to show that's, they're playing towards Sabine's strengths in this moment, and she's going to grow as a character in this episode itself, learning how to trust the force just a little bit more. And they got through the stormtroopers fairly easily, which, stormtroopers in Star Wars usually go down pretty easily. But then the Night Sisters go and they revive all of them and turn them into stormtrooper zombies, which, this is everything I could have ever asked for in anything Star Wars. I've been loving, like these little horror elements with these Night Sisters. They're very creepy in the Clone Wars animated show. And again, it's something that I never thought you would see in a live action Star Wars series or movie or whatever in a million years. And to see the dead rise up, and you have these zombie stormtroopers which are not going down by laser blasts like they were before, and they're just kind of, relentlessly going towards our heroes in a very great sequence where they're climbing up the stairs to this tower with zombies coming from the side, and it has like this horror element. And it's October, and it's the perfect time to have an episode like this and to have that sort of spooky vibe in a Star Wars series. And Rick Famuyiwa was the one who directed this episode, which, if you know me and you know this channel, you know that every single time I see his name on the credits of a Star Wars episode, I know it's going to be my favorite episode of Star Wars ever. He just has a way of directing his episodes and his, scenes and his characters and the action that I just absolutely love. But of course, our heroes are going to escape these zombie stormtroopers that were on their tail, and they're going to reach their destination where Lady Elsbeth is waiting at the top of the tower. And you get the greatest duel in the series so far. I know I love the duel between Ahsoka and Baylan, which I'll get into Baylan and Shin later on in this episode, because they don't really make an appearance in this episode whatsoever. They kind of are hinted for a future season of the show, which I'm a little bummed that we didn't get more of them in this season alone, but the idea of exploring them more in the future is also very exciting. But, let's get into the actual fight between Elsbeth and Ahsoka, which I genuinely think is one of my favorites fight scenes in all of Star Wars. Like, I loved the choreography. It starts off with a great wide shot of these characters coming at each other in an uncut way, and the choreography and the fighting and the action in this was so well staged. And I love Ahsoka utilizing both her lightsabers and Elsbeth using this, flaming green sword. It's so cool. And this fight scene goes on for a good amount of time with a lot of ups and downs. Elsbeth eventually cuts one of Ahsoka's lightsabers in half, bringing her down to only one weapon, and the fight kind of goes back and forth, and the choreography gets even more and more crazy. And at one point, a bunch of these zombie stormtroopers finally get to the top of the tower and surround Ahsoka, and all these stakes feel extremely high in this moment. And when I had that complaint early on with me saying that, these characters didn't feel as desperate in terms of trying to stop Thrawn at first in this battle, at this point, you do feel that desperation, because even Sabine and Ezra are at the top of the tower. Thrawn's ship has already departed and is already a good distance away from them to just simply jump up and get to it. And of course, there's these 2 last zombie stormtroopers at the top of this tower to try to stop them. And another great fight ensues with Ezra and Sabine fighting these 2 unstoppable forces, and they're desperately trying to get up there. And this was also another great sequence where you get to see Sabine even grow more as a character. With the true rite of passage for any Jedi, she has to reach out with the force to try to get her lightsaber to fly into her hand, as Luke did all those years ago in Empire Strikes Back. And so it truly is a rite of passage for a Jedi to do that at some point in Star Wars. Rey did it, Luke did it, and I'm sure Anakin did it at one point as well. I'm not entirely remembering off the top of my head, but it really is a rite of passage, and she does it in a very satisfying moment, taking out this zombie stormtrooper and helping Ezra get out of his situation. It was yet another great, little action sequence with these zombie stormtroopers, which just, these things are so much better than just normal stormtroopers. They are terrifying. Sabine has the idea to use the force to push Ezra up to Thrawn's ship as it's slowly departing. Ezra, he is starting to lose faith in this moment. He thinks that he has lost, but Sabine, of all characters, is like, no, let's trust in the Force. I will push you up there. And when Ezra jumps and she uses the Force to push him up there, after having that rite of passage of making that lightsaber fly in her hands, her confidence and her belief in the Force is rising in this moment. And I think that is a great way to slowly build her character over time. I think most of her development with the Force was actually just in this finale alone. So I think a lot of that works pretty well. I think overall her character developed in a slower and kind of a little bit more repetitive in the first 4 episodes. But I think once she made the decision to go try to save Ezra and to go against, Ahsoka's wishes at that point in time, and that reconciliation that those two characters had in this episode where Ahsoka said, it's okay, that is what you had to do. I made a lot of choices myself that went, against what a lot of people would have done otherwise, but my master was always by my side. My master was always, pushing for me in some sort of way to, do the things that I did and to support me. And that's exactly what Sabine needed. And so when you get to the point where it's Sabine's turn to jump up to the ship and she starts to run, but she sees Ahsoka and ELSBETH, get to the top of the tower and they're still fighting, and all these stormtroopers are starting to surround her. You see her start to run, and you cut to the fight itself, and Ahsoka's down on the ground, and ELSBETH says, "You are now alone. There's nothing you can do." And I think the best way to end Sabine's character arc was for her to have not jumped, for her to stay and help her master, as she kind of abandoned her previously in, I think, episode 4. And so I do think her arc by the ending of the season was really good. I think a lot of people were kind of struggling with her arc at the beginning of the season, but I think this episode did a lot of carrying the weight of all of that. I do think that this development was pretty uneven by the ending of it, but the fact that she stayed to help her master and she fought off the stormtroopers while, Ahsoka took out ELSBETH in the most epic way possible, I loved all of this. And so that is where our episode ends, with Ahsoka and Sabine stuck on this planet. Of course, Ezra gets onto, Thrawn's ship, and he goes off into the main galaxy, and they are, arriving at Dathomir at the end of this episode, with Thrawn and the Night Sisters, finally being back on Dathomir. And who knows what their plan is or what they're going to do on Dathomir, but to see a live action Dathomir in either season 2 of Ahsoka, which I really hope there's a season 2. I really hope they announce that soon. I don't want this to be like in some random episodes of Mandalorian season 4, although I do want Mandalorian to have a role into this eventually, because of course Dave Filoni is working towards his movie. But I do want to see, Mandalorian season 4 and Ahsoka season 2 kind of meld together and kind of play off of each other in a complementary way. And I do think that will happen with season 2 of Ahsoka, but I do want there to be a second season of Ahsoka, which I would be so excited for. But to see a live action Dathomir and the idea of having that in a second season is so exciting. Of course, Ezra goes off, he escapes Thrawn's ship, and he goes to reunite with the rebellion, essentially, or I guess the New Republic, and he meets up with HERA. And of course, he's going to have his entrance where he walks out as a stormtrooper, even though he could have very easily walked out with, no mask on, and to have this tension not be here in the scene. But of course, Chopper's going to roll up to him, and he's going to have a nice reunion with Chopper, and Hera's going to have like a tear in her eye seeing her lost friend. And this essentially confirms all those things that, they were saying at the beginning of this season, which Thrawn's return is imminent, and we need some sort of proof that he is still alive. And to have Ezra show up alive and well is really the only way to prove it in any sort of way. And so now we're going to have the New Republic aware and confident that Thrawn has returned because of Ezra's return. So that is where his character and Hera's character are left off at the end of this episode. And at this point, you do get a brief look at where Shin and Balin are during the events of this episode, with Shin, going off to the nomads that were living on this planet. She's kind of joined them to be, a part of their, I guess, group, essentially, because she didn't choose to follow Ahsoka in kind of redeeming herself in the light side. And, of course, Balin went off on his own adventure, so she went off to live with the nomads. And Balin, of course, sees in a very Lord of the Rings-esque way, he's on the top of this statue that's pointing out to this like little twinkle on a mountaintop in the distance. I really don't know what in the world he's looking for. If he's looking for like an old Jedi temple, or like an old ancient ways of the Force, or whatever he's looking for that is hinted at him exploring in a second season, which just makes it so upsetting that Ray Stevenson has passed away for so many reasons. His performance in the season and his, commanding presence whenever he is on screen, and just everything about his character, how interesting he was. And he was a large part in making this character interesting because, again, his character wasn't really explored too much. It wasn't really seen what exactly his motivations were, but you just knew it was shrouded in mystery, and he was very intriguing. And every time that he talked about the ancient history of the Jedi and how, he wanted to stop this cycle that is, repeating over and over again. And so they clearly clearly wanted to do more with this character, but without Ray Stevenson appearing again in Star Wars, that is just so upsetting to see. And, you know, I know they're probably going to recast this, but he left such a stamp on this character that will not be forgotten. This is one of his best performances that I've seen from him, and he will be truly missed as an actor, and just in the world in general, he was such a great talent to have in this series. And the final moments of the episode is Sabine and Ahsoka kind of accepting the fact that they are where they are and kind of feeling content with what they achieved in this episode. They sent Ezra home. They kind of accomplished one side of their goal. Yes, Thrawn did escape, but they have this sense of hope in the future because of, you know, Ahsoka seeing this owl creature that she has seen throughout Clone Wars and Rebels and now in this show as well. And so she feels like she's exactly where she needs to be. And there was a great moment where Sabine is standing on top of this, you know, hillside, looking off to the stars, looking off to the belt that surrounds this planet, saying, "Oh, I feel this shadow in the starlight," which I think is a great line. And she's not really confident with what she feels. And Ahsoka walks up and looks out on this ridge, and, you know, she has this smile on her face, which again shows that she is content with where she was. And that is exactly what I thought it was in this moment. It's like, okay, she's really grown as a character to be really confident and know that even if things didn't necessarily go their way in this finale, there is still hope out there for some reason. And then it cuts to what she was looking at, and you see Anakin's Force Ghost looking down on her, which I think is a great moment, which also shows that Hayden Christensen is going nowhere. He's fully back in Star Wars. The fandom has embraced him fully, and the studio has embraced him fully, which I absolutely love, that he's going to have more of a role as a Force Ghost himself in Season 2 of Ahsoka. Again, if there is a Season 2 of Ahsoka, please, Disney, announce that you're doing a Season 2, because I need it now. I absolutely loved this series. I think it ended on a very great, hopeful note, and there was a lot of great moments in the series in general. I don't entirely disagree with the character arcs in the season, especially surrounding Sabine, has been a little bit bumpy, but again, by this finale and where she ends up in this episode, where she was in the first one, I think her arc, although it was an uneven ride and not a consistent rise in her character, it did end off, especially in this episode, with a good arc. I think Ahsoka's arc was pretty great in this episode, with her, you know, trying to struggle with being a master herself and having, you know, these ideologies of Anakin kind of clashing with, you know, how she knows he became Vader. And even Thrawn throws a little shade at her in this episode, saying that I know who your master was and I know the potential of who you can become, but she has this confidence in who she is now that makes her not as affected by these words as she would have been by the beginning of this season. So I do think that her arc was pretty well defined. I love the casting in this series. I think, you know, Mary Elizabeth Winstead was great as HERA. I love the actor who's playing Ezra. I don't think I've seen him in anything else, but he has been great in this show so far. And of course, Rosario Dawson as our title character was always great in all these episodes of Ahsoka, and I do think that her, I guess, arc in general, this character in general, from Clone Wars all the way up until this point, you know, her being a more wizened and more, I guess, trustful Jedi Force that is kind of, I guess she's not really a Jedi, she's still in that little gray area on her own, but I think that her journey in Star Wars in general has been a great journey to follow. And of course, Natasha Bordizzo as Sabine Wren in this series, again, the writing wasn't always there for her character, but I do think that her performance was very strong, especially in this finale, so I'm very curious to see where her character goes into the future. But that is going to be my review for the finale of Ahsoka. What did you guys think of this episode? Definitely comment down below all your thoughts on the season as a whole, along with how satisfied you were by this finale. I was clearly very enthusiastic about it, so I'm very curious to hear what you guys think as well. And of course, if you did enjoy this review, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video as well. And to see more reviews from me here on the channel, I'm going to be reviewing a bunch of horror movies throughout all of the month of October. I'm going to start off with the Exorcist trilogy, the original trilogy from the 70s all the way up into the 90s, and of course the new Exorcist movie comes out on Friday, which I'm very excited to see and talk about that film as well, along with Loki starting next week, which I'll have to figure out exactly what my schedule will be for making reviews for Loki, but I cannot wait to start talking about that as well. But that's going to be it for me. Thanks guys for watching this video. Like I said, comment down below, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you all in my next one.